that can be tough, because the Lord uses things to get our attention that often is not comfortable. And God works in ways often that we don't understand, and inconveniences us. So that line really stuck out to me. Do whatever you need to do, and do what you need to do to make me more like you. And I guess makes you think. Sometimes people used to say, "Lord, give me patience," and it's like you probably don't need to pray that, because you just don't know what might be coming down the pipe when you pray something like that. So, that song could be a prayer, I think, for all of us. So thank you, Deborah. Appreciate that. Nehemiah chapter 4. I'm going to give a simple truth here tonight. It goes along the same lines of this morning's message. When Elisha said that he wanted a double portion of what Elijah had, so he had to let go of some of the things in his life and pick up the new, let go of the old, pick up the new, in order to have that double blessing. And this thought here is it's an old truth, and I've presented the truth to you before, and I fussed with the Lord about it, and because it's so similar to this morning's message, but always try to follow what the Lord's put on my heart. And so for a few days I've just kept thinking, Lord, you really want me to give this to everybody? There's nothing new under the sun. And yet I hope maybe somebody can take the simple truth and be reminded of it and apply it to our life, because it definitely is a truth that we need to be reminded of. I want to talk to you about getting rid of the rubbish in your life. Getting rid of the rubbish in your life. I don't know if you're like me, but I'm in the mood to get things cleaned up. Are you that way? My garage is to the point I just need to open the door, and it gets this way from time to time. I just need to open the door and scoot it all out on the driveway and start over. And I've done enough reading and organizing through the years that sometimes, and my closet, I've been throwing stuff away in my closet, and then you got to make the decision: do I really want to take this suit that's in the 70s and take it to Goodwill? Maybe, I don't know. And so the one pile that goes to Goodwill or Salvation Army, the other pile that says that just needs to go away. And shirts and pants that I haven't worn for 2 or 3, 4 years. They say after so many years, you go through different seasons and you haven't worn it, get rid of it, give it away, do whatever you need to do. And so I've come to the point to where I got to get rid of some things in order to do some spring cleaning, and ready to do so in my office, so my closet, my office, the garage. I'm in the mood to start working on my truck again. I went and priced newer trucks for me, and oh my word, with the interest rate being where it is right now, and the way prices have just continued to go up, it'd scare you to death to go price a new vehicle right now, or a newer used vehicle. And with inflation, and one thing about it, inflation seems to be continuing, but recession sure isn't. It amazes me that we have not had recession. I'm really kind of shocked that we haven't had recession, and that could be around the corner too. But I'm ready to start working on my truck a little bit more and finish fixing the rust. But the thing is, before I can fix it up really good, I got to get rid of some bad. And that's just the process. That's the way you go through it. And Nehemiah taught us that. So we see that in the book of Nehemiah. The Israelite people had been in Babylonian captivity for years, and The walls of Jerusalem had been torn down, and the temple and all these different things. They were in the process of rebuilding. And Ezra and Nehemiah talks about this rebuilding process. And so Nehemiah's heart was just burdened, and he wanted to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. And the king even realized, if we were to go to chapter 1, which we won't do so, but he asked him, why was his countenance so sad, and why were you of sorrow of heart? And so Nehemiah told him, he said, because basically my hometown, the walls of my city are torn down, and I want to go back and build it. And he went through all the different areas and the different gates that it talks about in chapter 2, and in the middle of the night, and the hand of God was on him, and I told those, that were around me that how the hand of God was on me, and we decided that we would rise up and build, and next to him, and next to him, and next to him, and next to him, and just a great book. It's just a great rebuilding chapter. But we see here, we'll begin here in chapter 4, and we'll look at verse 2, and then we'll go to verse 10. And so before we read, let's pray and ask the Lord to bless it. Now, dear Lord, we come to you tonight, and I pray that you'll speak to all of our hearts, that you'll take this simple truth and allow me to present it in a way that we can remember it, and maybe even for years to come that we can remember it. Just a little simple application, and we'll thank you for it in Jesus' name. Amen. Nehemiah chapter 4, and look at verse 2. And he spake before his brethren in the army of Samaria, and he said, what do these feeble Jews? Will they fortify themselves? Will they sacrifice? Will they make an end in a day? Will they revive the stones out of the heaps of the rubbish which is burned? This was their adversary who was speaking and said, can the children of Israel actually rebuild? I mean, do you really think they can do this? And look at the walls, and how are they going to build and revive the stones out of the heaps of the rubbish which are burned? Look, if you would, at verse 10. And Judah said, the strength of the bearers of burden is decayed, and there is much rubbish, so that they were not able to build the wall. And so even the adversaries understood that there was no way that they could build, that they were not even able to build because of the rubbish that they were dealing with. And so and it's mentioned in verse 11, and our adversary said, they shall not know, neither see, till we come in the midst among them and slay them and cause the work to cease. Obviously, I'm going to make a spiritual application. That's what preaching is all about. And whether we're trying to clean our lives up physically or materially, obviously even spiritually, and we'll get to just two little simple truths. But it says we're not able to build. They won't be able to build because of all the rubbish in verse 10. And the adversary said, we'll just sneak in when they aren't aware, and we'll attack them, and we'll be able to stop the progress. Isn't that exactly what the devil wants to do in our lives? He tries to catch us unaware. He's so subtle. And I've watched people through the years, because the devil is so subtle, I think even good people, and they've allowed themselves to be caught in the snare and in the web of the devil and of Satan and the world, the flesh, and the devil. And good people get out of church and they get away from God, and the rubbish continues to build in their life. And that's exactly what the adversary wants to do. The adversary says, we'll get them when they aren't paying attention, when they're unaware, and we will stop progress in their lives. I've seen way too many Christians through the years that I've watched progress stop in their lives. And it's because the devil's a roaring lion, seeks whom he may devour. And if he can build up that rubbish in all of our lives and to keep us from being profitable, that's exactly what he wants to do. And so he says we'll do that when they aren't aware. and they just aren't able to build. But Nehemiah, he says in verse 14, and I looked and I rose up and said unto the nobles and to the rulers and to the rest of the people, be not afraid of them, remember the Lord. And so, yeah, although the adversary said they're not able to build because of all of the rubbish, and we'll go in when they aren't aware, we'll create fear, but Nehemiah said, don't be afraid. Remember the Lord. Well, spiritually, I want to remind you tonight, just like I talked about this morning, getting rid of some things in your life. We have the fear of making some decisions in our life and picking up those good things, making the hard questions. You know, Elijah said, you've asked a hard thing to want a double portion. You've asked a hard thing. It's not always easy to serve the Lord, and the adversary doesn't want you to serve the Lord, but sometimes we allow fears to keep us from being what we ought to be. And Nehemiah said, don't be afraid. We need to trust the Lord, and so remember the Lord in your life. I've gotten to the point where exercising is not something I'm real regular at. I was using an illustration last week to somebody, I forget who I was talking to now, and we were talking about being active. And I still work around the house and do those kind of things, but to play real active sports, I'm just not. I'm entertainment now. I'm not competition when I play. And I've watched enough people be entertainment, and I've thought, I don't think I want to be the one entertaining, in that way. I was telling somebody how I used to be pretty good at volleyball, and thought I was at least. And I'd play in gyms and different things. We had a gym in West Virginia. I'd go in there on a regular basis and set myself up and spike. And I mean, we got to the point where you could spike and not get in the net and literally knock people off their feet if you hit them just right. And people, when you spike the ball, people are dodging on the other side. We just thought that was great stuff. And more at the net sometimes, if you didn't get the net caught in your armpit, it was good, and so maybe exaggerate. We got pretty good at it, and so, yeah, I think one of the last times I played volleyball was a church activity, and I'd always try to put Hannah or Autumn on one side of me so they could set me up. They were pretty good, and so I'd always say, go to Hannah or go to Autumn, and I think Hannah that day was right next to me, and so the first hit went to Hannah, and she popped it right up. I was so excited it was going to be so good, and so, man, I went and jumped, and I wheeled around, and I knew everybody better look out on the other side, and I come around, and I whiffed. I didn't even hit the ball, and then the volleyball hit me right on top of the head. And I said, "Oh my word!" And so, but I'm to that point now that if one of my boys say, "Here, Dad, let me get that," and now my grandsons, and Grandpa, let me get that. I said, "Okay, that's fine. You can do that. I'm all right with that." And but there was a day where I'd exercise, and I had dumbbells and all, you just a treadmill and a weight machine, and I'd do all of those exercises, and you hate to say it, but you look in the mirror and and see, and to see if your muscles are defined. And I remember one day my son drove up, and I was mowing the yard, and this was years ago, okay? I was mowing the yard, and I was wearing my short sleeve shirt, and I was mowing the yard, and Joshua gets out of the car, and he said, "Dad, this is disgusting." And I said, "What?" And he says, "I can't believe it." He said, "I told Nikki, I said, look at Dad." I said, his arms are bigger than mine. He said, "That's disgusting." And well, that's when I was, when I was working out. And so, but through the years, you get to the point to where, I remember I went through a 6-month period where I said, okay, I'm going to really get back in good shape again. And I think I was about 50, right around there, age of 50. And 6 months on a workout regimen, and at least 3 times a week, and you exercise your upper body and you exercise the lower body, and you have certain days for certain muscle groups, and you eat certain things, and even taking the protein and the certain vitamins, and man, I was going to get in great shape again. And so for 6 months, and boy, I did that for 6 months. I'm telling you all, I don't think I saw a bit of difference. I said, well, that's the end of that nonsense. I'm not going to do that anymore. And so, I mean, I want to be able to see some results. But I've heard some people say, you know, sometimes they get overweight, and then they say, overweight, yeah, eating too much of that is what made you overweight, probably. And so, you know, you talk to people through the years, and they think, I've actually heard people say, yeah, I got a lot of fat on me, and so since I got a lot of fat on me, I'm going to be able, I can build a lot of this fat into muscle. You're going to build that fat into muscle, huh? Yeah. So that's the way you're thinking. You're going to build that fat into muscle. And so I got to doing a little bit of research about that, and you know what I learned? It is not possible for you to get muscle out of fat. Okay? That is not possible. So for some of you young boys, I'm just going to tell you, fat never turns into muscle. Okay? Fat never turns into muscle. And so in order to get muscle, I learned and realized in order to get muscle, you have to lose the fat. Okay? So in order to get muscle, you have to lose the fat. And you say, what in the world does this have to do with the message, okay? And the application. Remember that they said about Nehemiah and the children of Israel, they can't even build because of all of the rubbish. You can't make any sense out of all of that. Look at the mess they got. So they can't even build. And so the 2 applications that we have here, first of all, first application is before you can build, you got to get rid of the rubbish. Before you can build, you have to get rid of the rubbish. And so to put it in an application for the young guys to understand it, and maybe even some of the girls, I don't know. I guess girls work out also. Fat never becomes muscle. You can build muscle from muscle, but you have to exercise to develop that muscle, and you have to get rid of the fat in order to get in shape. Okay, the only way you're going to really get in shape and to start building again is you're going to have to lay off the donuts, you're going to have to lay off the fried burgers and all of the French fries, and you're going to have to lay off of all of that stuff, and you're going to have to get rid of some fat in order to start building the muscle in your life. Okay, so spiritually, the same application applies to our life. In order to build the good in our lives, and before we can start making progress in our lives, God knows that there comes a time where we're going to have to do some spring cleaning, and we're going to have to get rid of all the rubbish in our life in order to make something good out of our life. And so before you can build, you're going to have to get rid of the rubbish. Boy, I've seen a lot of rubbish in Christians' lives through the years. Little things that keep them from being what they ought to be. Your life can become a mess and just filled up with all kind of things that aren't helping you, that are bogging you down and keeping you from being what you ought to be. And the bad thing is, once it starts piling up, it just gets worse and worse and worse, and you get discouraged, and you don't feel like doing anything anymore. And even when you get to where you're thinking, I'm in the mood, I think I'm going to do something. I mean, I know you got to start somewhere, but application of a job, application of a closet, application in an office, whatever the case may be. How many times have you looked at all the rubbish that's in your house or your closet, in your garage, and you just said, I don't even know where to start. That's too big of a job. I'll do that on another day. Yeah. And so you go out and find a tool that's under 4 or 5 different other tools, and half the things fall off the bench, and you know, it's just, and then you get frustrated. I ought to clean this up, but no, I'm too tired to clean it up now, and I got to fix this. And you make a little spot right there on the bench, a little 2-foot section, but what you're working on is 3 feet, so you slide everything over and more, and somebody ought to clean this up, you know, and it's just, you get frustrated and you get discouraged because of all of the rubbish in your life. And the truth is, you know that you aren't going to begin the process of building until you get rid of the rubbish. I love it. And when I was in vocational school, one thing that we did every day, the auto body teacher taught us, no matter what it was, whatever we were going, how big of a mess we made, we quit 30 minutes early, and we got out of school at 3, but at 2:30, we all quit. We turned in our tools. We put them in the tool boxes. We took them to the storage place, and we had to turn them all in, and we had to sweep. And we backed all the cars that we could. If some of them were on jack stands or something, we left those. But we turned all the tools in, threw away everything that we needed to throw away, and we got the brooms and we swept, and then we wet the whole floor down, and we had the squeegees, and we squeegeed the whole floor so that the next day when we came in, the bench was clean, the floor was clean, all of our tools were up, and we knew that the next day we could come back in and we could start where we left off, and we could find everything, and everything was all cleaned up so that we could make progress. And so Nehemiah knew that the only way that they could start building was if they got rid of the bad. They had to get rid of the rubbish so they could begin to build on the good. And so what is it in your life that you know that you need to get rid of before you can start building your Christian life again? And probably most of us, if we'll be honest with ourselves, have some rubbish in our life that keeps us discouraged, keeps us weighted down, keeps us from being what we ought to be. We're carrying around way too much fat, okay? And so you got to get rid of it. So you got to get rid of the rubbish in order to build the good. So you got to get rid of the bad to build the good. Not only do we need to get rid of the bad to build the good, but we need to get rid of the bad to see the good. You got to get rid of the bad to see the good. Have you ever heard anybody say, "Yep, I got a 6-pack right here," but you just can't see it? It's too much fat covering it all up, but it's in there. Okay, it's in there. Now, personally, I've never seen that in my life, and so, but some people have seen that. Other guys, they got the 12 or 24 pack. It hangs out way over their belt from too much drinking. Evidences of all of that, and so, they couldn't even. They weren't able to build because of all of the rubbish. So in order to build, they had to get rid of the bad to build the good. But not only that, but they had to get rid of the bad to see the good. You know, I enjoy being a cheerleader for people. And I believe in people. Sometimes it's maybe, you are disheartened sometimes along the way, or disappointed because you believe in people and it doesn't always turn out the way you'd like for it to turn out. But boy, I'm a cheerleader for people. I really am. And sometimes I've probably been criticized over being such a cheerleader for other people. But the truth is, I look at most people and I realize there's some good in just about all of us. And there really is. One reason why this afternoon I said, you know, those two girls that they got baptized this morning rode on the bus, and the mom and the dad came, and all of them had such a pleasant spirit this morning. And I just thought that was great. I said, you know, it's for young people like that that makes every penny we put into those buses worth it. And so I say that because we're going to have a business meeting pretty soon and be reminded. So I want to remind you of that. We got one bus that's in rough shape, and we actually need to replace it, and it's not going to be cheap for us to replace it. But how do you put a value on two girls that just got saved in the last few weeks and got baptized with mom and daddy sitting in the services? The mom and daddy both said when they walked out this morning that, you know, we're going to be back, and you'll probably see us from time to time. And I said, I like that. I think that's the way that it should be. That's the way we want it. You know, the truth is, we're trying to build a good environment for these kids. We're trying to help them get good in their lives. And we just never know how God may use, whether it's a bus kid or one of these guys right here. All of these guys sitting in the front row have mom and dads that are sitting here tonight. And I know these guys are honoring. I understand that. Sometimes they probably say things and do things and makes you want to wring their neck or, you know, give them a little kick and say, what are you thinking? What in the world is wrong with you? You know, so I understand that. But the truth is, there's probably some really good things in the heart of all these boys. Yep. And not just these young men, but across our auditorium here this evening. Yep. You know, I look at you all, you adults. I know sometimes you get out of sorts. You let rubbish come in your life. And, you know, I've said to people that he's a pretty good guy when he's not drinking. You know, isn't that true? You probably said that about somebody. He's a pretty good guy when he's not drinking. How many times have you said about another young person, you know what, when they're not around those friends, they really have a sweet spirit. But when they get around so-and-so, it all goes to the dogs, and they're not very good when I don't like to be around them when they're around that person. Yep. You know, so sometimes we're trying to get rid of the bad so that we can see the good. Because there's some good in some people if we can keep the bad from covering up the good that's in them. And you see, we got to be careful because our life we can only build our life beyond, don't miss this, we can only build our life beyond the rubbish that's in our life. We can only build beyond the rubbish that's in our life. Well, that song that we sing with the little kids, the wise men build his house upon the rocks. The wise men built his house upon the rocks. The wise men built his house upon the rocks, and the rains came tumbling down. You know, I don't even know if we sing those songs anymore. Those are such old songs. And the rains came down, and the floods came up, and the rains came down, and the floods came up, and the rains came down, and the floods came up, and the house on the rock stood firm. But the foolish man built his house upon the sand. The foolish man built his house upon the sand. The foolish man built his house upon the sand, and rains came down. And when the rains came down, the floods came up, and we sing that, and you sing a few verses of that, and when the floods came up, and the walls on the sand went splat. And so the moral of that is obviously to build your house on a good foundation. But if you got so much rubbish in your life, how are you going to build? How are you going to build? I need to cut some rust out of my truck. You know what the crazy thing is? I have one panel. I fixed one panel last year and got that all taken care of. But my other panel that I got partway done, then it got cold on me, and I've got it all cut out. You know what the crazy thing is? I've noticed with all of that rust that's cut out of that other side, my rust hasn't expanded. That one panel looks pretty good. It's because I cut all of that rust out. You know what the truth is? Your life will never prosper and expand as long as you got that corrosion, you got that rubbish, and it keeps building in your life, and it keeps spreading, and it keeps growing. The only way you're going to see the good in your life is if you get rid of all of that rubbish, you get everything cleaned out, and when you get everything cleaned out, Nehemiah later on, he said, so we went back to the work, and we continued the latter part of this verse 15, and it says that we returned all of us to the wall, everyone unto his work. And so let me encourage you tonight to evaluate and ask yourself, spiritually, what do you need to get rid of so that you can build? And so in order to be what you ought to be, you got to get rid of the bad to build the good, and you need to get rid of the bad in order to see the good. And until we do that, until we get rid of the rubbish in our lives, it's just going to keep piling up and expanding and growing and discouraging. And the only way to be what you ought to be is if you get rid of the rubbish in your life.